We're in a series that we started last week we were calling Busy, Tired, Worn Out. Busy, tired, worn out. Now, life is full of demands, full of responsibilities. It is full of pressure. And it can get like from at home and responsibilities at home to at work or at school. And life can get busy, can't it? Life can get so you are physically tired at the end. Life can get such a pace where you feel, I am so worn out. And now we talked about how you can't just, maybe you can make it work for a time, but if you want to go for the long haul, you can't be going through life. It's no way to go through life busy, tired, and worn out. And so we've been looking at how can we, if you feel busy, tired, worn out, don't feel condemnation. I feel that too, busy, tired, worn out. But that there's hope for you and I. If you feel tired, if you feel busy, if you feel worn out and burnt out, that there is hope for you and I. And that there's a way in which we can go about the responsibilities of life. We can go about handling the demands and pressures of life, but yet not be busy, but go at a sustainable pace. Not be tired, but have rest. Not be worn out, but run the race and finish strong. And that Jesus says this in Matthew 11, verse 28. Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens." Anybody going to Jesus right now, thinking about your week? All right, here I go. He's talking to me. He's talking to me. "And I will give you rest." There is rest for you. "Take my yoke upon you and let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart. And you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden, and the burden I give you is light." There is hope for us, that there is rest for your souls. In the midst of the busyness and the chaos and the demands of life, that there is rest for your soul. We said last week that what Jesus, he could have said anything as he was talking, but he chose yoke. He chose yoke and not talking about your breakfast. But that a yoke of how you go around with an oxen would have a yoke around their neck, and it would put them together, and it was a tool of work. So Jesus is saying here that, you know what, come to me, yoke your life, connect yourself with me, and I'll show you how to do the work, how to handle the responsibility, how to deal with the pressures. Not that I'm out, I'm peacing out, that's it, I can't do it, but instead, there's a way in which you can go through life that you can actually go and it won't be tired, busy, and worn out. And we talked about last week how there's a rhythm of grace, and that we need intentional margin in our life, the space in between the max. I won't get into it again. You can listen to last week, but we're going to build on that this week. If you're taking notes, and I think it's always good to, because retrievable knowledge is usable knowledge. And so the title of my message is The Forgotten Gift. The Forgotten Gift. You know, this season for me, like September, really is a season of rediscovery. It's a season of rediscovery when I go into my closet and I need like a sweater to put on. When it gets cold outside, I rediscover all the things that I forgot for 4 months. I go into my closet and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that sweater. Oh yeah, I have a winter jacket. There it is. It's a season of rediscovery. For those 4 months, I have not thought once about a hoodie. I've not thought once about down parkas at all. No, I rebuke that in Jesus' name. I got a bigger amen for that one, but me too. But I forgot about it. I was even pulling out this one sweater that I got as a gift. And it is so comfy. It's like butter, but so warm. And I was eyeing that sweater up this week as it was getting cold and a little chilly. And I'm like, okay, I forgot about you, this gift, but I'm putting this thing on. But I had allowed the time of 4 months to forget the gift that I loved, that I wore all the time, only in 4 months at the back of my closet because I didn't use it. But there's actually an account with the Israelites They had a gift that was given to them, but because of not 4 months, but 430 years of not using it, that they had forgotten about it. That they hadn't used this gift and they had forgotten about it. The Israelites, not 4 months, but 430 years. And the gift I'm talking about is Sabbath. Now, Sabbath means literally to rest, to cease from work. A gift from God, a day of rest and worship. What is Sabbath? If you think of what is Sabbath, it is a day of intentional rest and worship. In Genesis 2, verse 1, it says this. So, this is the creation account. So, creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in it was complete. On the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy because it was the day when he had rested from all his work of creation. Now, the Hebrews, they would have practiced this rhythm in their life. This rhythm of part of their life was a day of rest and worship. One day a week out of 7 for rest and worship. They would have practiced this, passed down through oral tradition. They would have been telling how God rested, and they would have followed suit. That Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they would have all had that as part of their rhythm in their week. Out of 7, one day was for rest and worship. But there's something that happened in the time when Joseph had died after they'd went to Egypt, is that Egypt took the Hebrews as slaves. They took the Hebrews as slaves, and slaves is forced labor. They were confined and forced labor. They took away their freedom. They imposed forced labor on them. And continuous working, continuous laboring for 430 years of slavery. And in that time, Sabbath would have been taken away from them. A day of rest and worship was taken away from them. Israel did not observe the Sabbath to cease work and rest in that time. Why? Because their master, Pharaoh, made them continually work and continually toil. Who their master was kept them from resting and ceasing their work to worship. See, the Sabbath for the Israelites, the Hebrews, it was a gift, a luxury, something that not everybody had, to cease and rest and worship. But it was taken from them, and I believe it was forgotten. But God delivered the Hebrews. If you read throughout that God delivered, then you have, the 10 plagues, the Red Sea opening. Their shoes didn't even get wet. It was incredible. God delivered them. And one of the things that God did right away was he put in the 10 commandments. And Exodus 20, verse 8 says this. It says, remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath day of rest, dedication to your God. On the day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you. For in the 6th day the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the 7th day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. So the Sabbath is not something laborious. It wasn't a duty. It was a gift. A gift of not working and resting and worshiping God. And because they were no longer a slave to Pharaoh, nor Pharaoh was their Lord anymore of their life, that they now could actually have one day to cease from their work, to rest, and to worship. And that I can see that every day for their ancestors, there was no rest, no ceasing from their work. But every time they started to do what God had told them to do, of rest from your work and worship, it was a reminder to themselves, I'm no longer a slave, that I am free, that Pharaoh is no longer my Lord, but that God is my Lord. There would be a that I remember every time I rest, I'm no longer a slave, but that I am free. So every 7 days would be a reminder, I'm not in captivity anymore. I am free. I am free. That one day a week for rest and worship. And every time they would be reminded, I am free now. Now, you fast forward thousands of years later, and the Pharisees and Sadducees, they made Sabbath something that it was not. They put these rules and these ordinances in that you had to keep the Sabbath. Because I don't know about you, but when I hear the term Sabbath, when I first heard it, I thought of like Pharisees and Sadducees. And I'm like, I remember the song from Sunday school, I don't want to be those guys. Right? I do not want to be a Pharisee, a Sadducee. I just want to be a sheep. That was But see, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they made the Sabbath something that it was not. So much so that they got angry with Jesus when he was on the Sabbath day, he healed a man. They got angry with the disciples for picking heads of wheat. And Jesus said this, though, in Mark 2, verse 27, he said, then Jesus said to them, the Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people and not people to meet the requirements of Sabbath. In other words, the Sabbath was made for people. The Sabbath was made for you. The rhythm of work 6 days, have a day of rest, to pause and worship, to rest and worship was made for people. It's a gift from God. It's a gift from God. A God-given day of rest and worship. Rest physically, where your body actually gets some rest. Rest for your mind, where your mind gets rest. Where you can be rejuvenated by doing some fun things that are restful. To be with your family. To worship God and to refocus on Him on that day. See, this is a gift from God, the Sabbath. It's made for people. And before the Industrial Revolution instituted weekends, God said, hey, you should have a day of rest. Before that influencer that's like saying, well, you really should have self-care and have rest, it was God's idea. Before that, God said, I have designed a rhythm for you. And a rhythm is this, is to work, but then have one day where you rest and you worship. One day of rest and worship. That sounds a gift. It's almost like God said, every 7 days, I've designed you to have a vacation of rest and worship. 7 days of where you cease from your work. There's a built-in rhythm to it. Last week, Scott, I had him come up and play, and he played 2 different ways of the drums. He played, and there was some rhythm because there was actual margin in between when he hit the one tom and the other hi-hat. I don't know what he was hitting at the time, but it was drums. And then he played where there was no margin, and he just went at the drums, and there was no space between when he hit one to the other, and what didn't sound rhythm, it sounded like noise. And how it was the important thing in life. Your life will sound like noise and feel like noise, and you'll get tired, busy, and worn out if there's no built-in margin. But you can be hitting the same drums, you can be doing the same responsibilities, the same pressures, the same everything, but with margin, it's not noise, but it actually becomes music. It becomes rhythm. And so God has actually built in His design for people, a rhythm of your week where there is one day of rest and worship. Not legalistic, not laborsome. It's not something that when you do, God gives you a star and He says, I love you even more. It has nothing to do with that. It's a gift from God so that you can sustain and run further and faster and finish strong. That it is a gift from God. Now the question is, okay, God said that in the Old Testament as part of everything. Is that for today? Is taking a day of rest and worship for today? I think if we're talking about the way the Sadducees, the Pharisees saw it, yeah, no. But having an intentional day of rest, part of the rhythm of your week, rest is not inactivity, but it's intentional activity. Worship as part of your life, I believe, yes, it is for us today as as New Testament, New Covenant believers. That God has designed that to be part of our rhythm. That we would have intentional times where we would rest, cease from what we do, and to worship God. We see Jesus, he kept the Sabbath. Jesus said he made the Sabbath as a gift for us. I think you can only go so long nonstop. You can do it. There's sometimes seasons where you must do it, but you can only go nonstop for so long. Before that, it starts to affect your energy. It starts to affect your relationships. It starts to affect your health. It starts to affect your mental health. It starts to affect your connection with God. See, the Sabbath, God did it before even the law. In creation, he rested. The Sabbath isn't something that's laborious or legalistic. It's a rhythm that God has laid out for us and invites us to do so that we would have rest and worship. But I think as the Israelites, they were in bondage, they were in slavery. We too can be in bondage or in slavery to things that keep us from taking advantage or using the gift of God that is called Sabbath, to rest, and a day of rest and worship. We could be in bondage to self-effort. I got to make this happen. It's me. I got to make it happen. The buck does stop with me, but am I Lord of my life? I guess that's up to you. I would say Jesus does a better job at that. But I could be a slave to my career or to my job or to my company. Maybe ambition is my master. I want advancement. I think there is nothing wrong with having drive. I think that's actually God-given. In everything you do it unto the Lord. I'm doing it with excellence. I want to move forward. Faith always moves forward. But if my ambition or my I'm going to do it comes at the sacrifice, and it can cause me to not worship and rest. It could be to money, and I can't rest, I can't worship and have a whole day to that because I am leaving money on the table. Josiah, have you seen the price of strawberries? I am leaving money on the table. Maybe it's fear. I don't know what's going to happen. So I need to do something. But can I encourage you is that the Bible says that who the Son sets free is free indeed. That you are no longer bound or a slave, and that Jesus has set you free. That Jesus has set you free just as the Israelites were free. That the Sabbath day, a day of rest and worship, is for you. That it's a declaration every time you say, okay, today I'm going to be intentional. Not out of religiosity or like I got to get a star or something weird like that. I don't think he hands out stars. He does hand out crowns later, but it's not out of religiosity, but instead it's a declaration to yourself. Okay, self, I am free. I'm not the Lord of my life. I'm not the source of my life. God, you are the source. You are the source. And I believe it allows you to gain refreshing, that I'm not a slave to my ambition, to money. I'm not a slave to fear of lack. I'm not a slave to my company or my job. I'm not a slave to my self-effort, and that is not my master. See, a day of Sabbath of saying I'm going to actually rest and worship is saying that Jesus has made me free. I am free in Jesus, and I will worship him. And it creates margin in your life to rest and worship, margin for him to work. We talked about last week that whenever there's margin in our life, it allows God to fill it. It allows God to fill it by having margin in your week of saying, okay, this one day, it doesn't have to be a specific day. This one day, I'm resting and I'm worshiping. I'm allowing margin for then God to fill, for God to work. Psalms 127 talks about that. Unless the Lord builds the house, I'm toiling, I'm going in vain. There was a season in my life where I was exactly that. I absolutely knew God said, okay, take a day of rest, and I didn't do it at all. And I was a pastor. And I actively knew that. I was a pastor. I had my business. We just had a baby. Oh, cute little Levi. Oh, my goodness. But I was working like 16, 17 hours, seven days a week. And I was just going. And eventually what happened was, I was burning the candle on both ends, and then we decided, let's add an extra wick, and then we burnt even more. But is eventually I started to feel disconnected from God, disconnected from the relationships around. I couldn't give 100% to any which way because I was just running on fumes trying to make it. Relationships suffered. There were great things, even God things, but it wasn't sustainable, and I felt busy, tired, worn out, and it wasn't a rhythm. It was just noise. I think there are times where we feel like I need to just do more. Have you ever had like your mental to-do list? Yeah, I have that too. And where it's like, I just need to get everything done. Or for your company, it's like, okay, we got to hustle, we got to grind. I get that too. And there's that to-do list. And, I need to get it done. But I think that actually as you follow the rhythm that God has set, that you actually get more done. I found that. You get more done in that time. Right. The disciples, they were out there ministering. They were doing amazing, great things. And they came back to Jesus in Mark 6:31. And Jesus said this, in Mark 6, verse 31, Jesus said to them, let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest for a while. He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. Have you ever felt that place? Life is just coming and going, and the hustle and the things, even they're great things. Not good, not bad things. It's like good things. It's like all these opportunities. Life is just going so fast, and there's so much. It's like I don't even have a time to eat. And Jesus says, okay, there's still things, but we're going to come away and eat with me. What do? They came away with Jesus. They withdrew with Jesus. I think this is for us too, is that we are to rest and worship, have that time with him because we need it. That it is really a gift for us to rest, rejuvenate as we worship. And Sabbath really, having that part of your rhythm. I'm talking about a rhythm. Not about God being more happy with you because you did. It has nothing to do with your salvation. Hebrews 4:10 talks about that there's a rest for the people of God. That's talking about that we don't have to work for salvation, that we can now rest in what Jesus has done. This is not legalistic. I'm not saying like, hey, if the kids make a mess on if Sunday is the Sabbath, that in your week, the kids make a mess. Sorry, I can't clean it up. Sabbath. Natalie asked me to take the garbage out. Sorry, I can't. It's Sabbath. I'm not saying that. That's crazy. That's a good way to get into marriage counseling. I'm not saying that if you're working a shift on Sunday, that's evil. I'm not saying that either. I'm not saying it has to be a certain day, Sunday. What I'm saying is that in your rhythm of life, you need one day that's designed, God has designed us for one day where you cease from your work and you rest and you worship. You rest and you worship. And it will remind you, I am free in Christ. It will spiritually bring refreshing to your soul. Physically, it will refresh you. Have you ever been just going, and then you just have one day where it's like relaxed, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not a horrible human being. I was just tired. It gives you mental refreshment. It allows you to connect again in your relationships. It's God's design for you. So how does this look like? Intentional Sabbath, allowing that a rhythm in your week of rest and worship. Well, what would be some of the elements that would be in there? I would say, if it's Sundays, man, I would say it's coming to church and worshiping with the family of God. That there is hearing his word, focusing on him, worshiping with fellow believers. There's something that God has for us where he says, hey, don't neglect this. Don't let that slide by because I have something for you in it. I would say another element which would be great is family and friends. That in the Sabbath is family and friends. Having time with them, I think is important. And doing something restful and something fun. Do something fun. Maybe it's going in nature. Maybe it's a hobby. Maybe it's walking. Maybe it's cooking. You're like, I love cooking. And you're like, well, is that Sabbathy? Yeah, it is. We're not legalistic crazies. It's like that. It's. I think that's from God. But it's on a Sabbath. It's like, okay, I'm going to pause the emails. I'm going to pause the work. I'm going to pause the projects. I'm going to put my phone down. I'm going to, in business often I'd use the metaphor, okay, like about moving the ball forward, right? Like the metaphorical ball that every business owner has. All right, let's move the ball forward. What a Sabbath is saying, okay, here you go, Jesus. And you kick him the ball. And you're saying, today I'm not touching the ball. You move it forward. I'm resting and worshiping you. Right? And as you rest and you worship him, he works. He's moving that metaphorical ball forward. I think there's a difference between just a day off and Sabbath, intentional rest and worship. Now, something that I always do multiple times a year is clean my garage. Like all the time. And every time I get it cleaned and organized and I'm like so proud, I'm like, Nat, check this out. And a whole new world. It's like so amazing. It's so clean. It's together. And it's like this empty space. And then over a short amount of time, all of a sudden it starts to get full of just this week, we picked up a big girl bed for my daughter. And that is before it was in the house, it was in our garage. Random bikes are in our garage. Random church stuff is in our garage. Random sticks and twigs and collections that 6-year-olds like are in the garage. Random stuff is there. There was this margin, this beautiful space. It was there. And then suddenly it's cluttered again. And I think that can be this way too of if you have, okay, this is my day of rest and worship without boundaries of saying this is what it will be. It will get cluttered with other things because there's always something that needs to be done. There's always something that you need to do. There are things that will go in there. But boundaries of saying this is the purpose and nothing else outside of that will go here, I think actually will help you. It will be so that the day that you say, okay, I'm going to actually start practicing this, that it doesn't get cluttered. And that's not legalistic. That's just being intentional. Like, bro, we're not putting sticks and rocks in our garage. I just cleaned it. The same thing with Sabbath. Okay, if this thing is restful to me, if this is worship, it's going here. But if it's outside of that, there's 6 other days that it can happen. And I believe then it gives you that freedom to actually rest. And that you can actually be refreshed. That you can, now I'm totally speaking to myself. I'm an in-process guy. Like, I'm so addicted to my phone and my emails. I check it way too much. And I know that. And I'm working that with the Lord of like, Lord, I'm having an issue here. Why am I checking my email this much? Why, Lord, so I'm working on it. Just like, I bet you there are things that you can work on. But it's like, okay, we're not perfect, but let's start moving there. I know for me, my boundary is, okay, I should not be checking my email 20,000 times on the Sabbath, on the day that I'm saying I'm resting and I'm worshiping. I'll do everything unto the Lord, but maybe not emails that day, Josiah. But maybe you feel like, hey, I can't do it. I get it. But I would encourage you to try it. You say, I have so many things to do. I got all this stuff to do. I'd encourage you to try it. And that as you do, I bet you'll find that as you're operating in the rhythm that Jesus is, what are you doing then? You're yoking your life to him. You're changing the rhythm of your life. you'll find you'll get stuff done easier. You'll move forward. As you say, okay, I'm going to actually have a day of rest and worship, that's a step of faith. Saying, actually, I'm going to leave this day for just simply rest and worship. I'm going to then allow you, God, to take care of the rest. I believe this is that your purpose, your call from God is too important for you not to have the rhythm of rest and worship in your life. That God has a good plan. He's got great things that he's calling you to. The Bible says an upward call of God. And your call, what he has, the people that he has put in your life, it is too important for you to not have the rhythm of rest and worship in there. Because it is with the rhythm of rest and worship that you can be the best that God has called you to be. That you can run with endurance the race that God has put before you. That, see, your family, your community, your friends, the call of God on your life, they need you. You need to be at a place where you have a rest and worship rhythm in your life. And so can I challenge you today? Maybe you haven't done this. I didn't start doing this. If I'm completely honest, I didn't start doing this until like 5 years, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. What can I say to make you feel I'm more spiritual? No, I'm just kidding. Like 3 years ago, I actually started taking this seriously of, okay, I'm going to practice having an actual day of a Sabbath of rest and worship. And it allows me, and it will allow you, to renew your spirit. It will allow you to renew your energy. It will allow you to refocus. It will remind yourself, as it did the Israelites, that Jesus has set me free, so I'm resting today. Jesus has set me free so I can worship today. Jesus has set me free so I can take a rest and mentally be refreshed. That I can physically be refreshed. As Matthew 11:28 says, then Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. This is one of those designs, to have a rhythm in your week of rest and worship. Would you stand with me? God, he is so good. And I love that he takes us wherever we are and says, okay, come with me. Walk with me. It's not condemning in any way, but an upward call of God. That he has good plans and purposes. And that he's designed a rhythm for you so that you would run the race. That you can take the pressures, the demands, the challenges that life has, and be able to carry them with him. And part of that, I believe, is incorporating a rhythm of rest and worship. God, I'm focusing on you. Yeah, we can do it every single day. But today, this is my purpose. I'm resting and I'm worshiping.